Okay, so that's the basics of a house. What if I want to do more with this? So now improving your house. So there's some other things that we're going to add to this. We're going to add this ground plane, basically a big flat plane that's going to be at the bottom of my house. And I'm going to do that by, I think I'm going to move this thing up so that it is aligned to the plane of this thing. And then I'm going to add a ground object. So if I go to orthographic mode and look from the front, I'm going to hit A twice, once to deselect everything and then once to select everything. And I'm going to grab this and put it on the G axis. Oops, did I not grab everything? There we go. Okay, so now it's roughly on the ground. Next, I want to add in a plane. So you can either do the Shift A to add something in, and it'll tell you which thing you want to add in, or you can go up to Add, Mesh, and Plane. Either one will do. So you may notice that there's this plane under here. It's kind of smallish, so I think I'm going to scale it up. So I can do it from here and scale in each of the different directions. Or I can just hit S and it'll scale it in general in all directions. Now notice where the mouse is when I hit the letter S matters. So if I hit S when I'm right here, I only have this much room to work with. And so it's much more coarse because I'm very close to the point. Another thing I could do, so I just hit escape there. If I hit S when I'm way out here, I have much finer control because that line is much larger. So where your mouse actually is positioned when you scale things matters. There we go. Look, a ground plane. Now these are two separate objects now, so if I'm in object mode, oh, I'm sorry. I did that in edit mode, so they are now the same object. If you want them to be separate objects, you can actually pull them apart. If you were in object mode when you added that plane in, it would actually make them two separate ones. So let's say that I do want to make this two separate things. So I would really like my plane to be something else. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back into edit mode, and I'm going to select my 4 points of my plane and hit P, which is separate, and go to selection. So now if I go back into object mode, notice that these are two separate things, and I can move them independently. If I don't do that, so if they're all one object, then if I'm manipulating one object, I'm manipulating the whole thing. Now let's say that I'm like, well, actually what I'd kind of like to do is make them all the same. So I'd like to take all of this and join it with this plane out here, so that if I move one thing, I move it all. Sometimes you want that as well. What you're going to do then is you're going to select one, hold down Shift and select the other by right-clicking, and do Control-J to join them. So now notice that the whole thing is outlined. It's all one object, and if I go into edit mode, the whole thing is selectable. All right, tangent aside. So they scale it way up. So the next thing we're going to look at is having to do with putting this cursor up here at the top of the roof, and then we're going to extrude out from the bottom the roof. So the idea is that we're going to select these edges, and we're going to move them out based on this. So at the moment, we're setting everything, if we scale things out, it's all based on the middle of the average of all these objects. So if I say, select all these points and try and extrude them out, so if I do these 4 things and extrude, it's just going in whatever direction as a box. If I want to extrude out from a point, I have to give it a particular point to extrude from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this 3D cursor, this red and white thing, up here at the peak. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select this vertex select, grab my top point, which deselects everything else by right-clicking, and I'm going to move my cursor to that point. So they say that basically right here, we want to make sure that Where is it? We want to basically move the cursor to that point. So I'm going to go into Mesh and Snap. And I want to snap the cursor to where I'm selected right now. Notice that jumps the cursor to that point. And then what I'm going to do is grab these edges by going to Edge Select and Shift and right-clicking all of them. And I'm going to extrude from that center point. Now, at the moment, if I extrude, it's still doing that same box thing. So if I want to extrude, all of these edges, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit E to extrude and then S to extrude uniformly. Now at the moment, if I extrude and I scale, notice it goes directly out from the house. So if I look on it from a plane, extrude and scale, it goes straight out. Not what I want. What I want to do is I want to make sure that it's extruding from the 3D cursor instead. So now if I extrude with my median point as the 3D cursor, which is this menu here, as opposed to the median point, E for extrude, S for scale, notice it's coming down from that point and creates a nice little roof. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to actually extend the house out to make it longer. So I'm going to extrude those faces. I just want these two planes and the side of this house here. So I'm going to select those, and then I'm going to extrude on the x-axis. So the x-axis is the red one. So my plan is to take these three faces. I'm going to grab that one, hold down Shift, right-click on that one, right-click on that one. Those ones. So now I'm going to extrude, and I'm going to, which is letter E, and then X for just the x-axis. Blam, house. All right, so for those of you that are perfectionisty and are like, that line bothers me, one thing you need to know, about editing things is that you can actually delete and add things back in. So for example, let's say that I'm like, I don't like that edge. It bothers me deep inside. What you can do is you can hit the delete key after you've selected something and choose what you're deleting. So in this case, I might be like, okay, delete that edge. That drives me crazy. Now, notice that puts a hole in my object. If that bothers you, which I imagine it would, what you have to do is you have to put the face back in. So if you select 2 points, so if I select these 2 points, for example, and I hit the letter F, it puts an edge in. If I select a third point and hit F, it puts in a face. And you can do 3 or you can do 4-point faces. If you try and do 5 or 6, it won't let you do it. So once again, I can delete that edge, and then put in these points if that's what you need. One other thing to watch out for, it is possible to make things that have multiple points all go to the same spot. So it's possible that around this little area here to have 3 or 4 vertices that all meet, and sometimes that'll cause you problems where you'll have 2 or 3 edges all in the same position. And if that's the case, let's say that I accidentally put in 3 or 4 vertices here, I would have to delete all 3 or 4 individually. One way to get around that is if you actually go into Vertex Select and select everything, and you remove doubles. What will happen is that GameMaker will try and calculate points that are almost the same spot and try and get rid of them so that it merges all the points into the same thing. And it'll actually tell you which vertices it removes. That's a really useful thing to do every once in a while if you find that you've got 2 or 3 faces that are all in exactly the same spot and it's kind of a pain to delete. Select everything and remove doubles and then try messing with your model. All right, subdivision of faces. So this is where a lot of the power comes from. So I'm going to deselect everything. And let's say I want to take this face here and mess with it. So if you want to subdivide something, you can do that here or hit W and subdivide. And it'll subdivide it once. If you want to do it more than once, there's a little menu that pops up over here which allows you to subdivide multiple times. And what this does is it makes it so that you can have finer control over a surface. So let's say that I want to make a window. What I could do is I can subdivide it a bunch of times and grab just pieces of this and do something with it. So I'm going to do it a couple more times. There we go. So maybe I want to take these four and make it a window. I could delete it. I could extrude it in by going into the y-axis. That'll push it in a little bit, make a little indented window. Or I could delete that. Now, at some point, you may have a whole bunch of them. So let's undo that real quick and say, let's say I want to do all of these things, and I'm getting tired of right-clicking, and I'm like, boy, isn't there a faster way to select a bunch of these? And the answer is yes. Yes, there is. So if I hit the letter B, it comes up with these two crosshairs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to left-click and drag a little box. Everything within that box gets selected. Awesome, huh? Now, if it's not a regular box shape, though, so let's say I have this view at a funny angle, so something like that. If I try and do a box shape on these, I might not select exactly what I want. Another thing you can do is you can use the letter C. This is circle mode. Notice that as you scroll in or out, it increases or decreases the size of your selection, and you just left-click and drag the ones you want. Now, it stays in circle select, so notice that if I keep left-clicking, it keeps adding things. I have to hit escape to get out of that mode. And then I can deselect things if I want by holding down shift and right-clicking. And that will allow me to select things that I want. All right, so there's more to the tutorial as far as finishing it up, but that should give you the basics of what you need to do for the house. Keep in mind that a chimney is something that goes in here. You could have a cube that you put in and then stretch and put in. You could actually subdivide the roof and pull part of that out. It's up to you how you do that.